in the years that I've been studying giants, one of the names that came up was long walkers. Now, that's what the special operations community in the U.S. military call giants. By the way, it's always in an active, alive sense, never in a dead sense. You know, you don't have to worry about bones, coming at you, maybe munching on you, but you sure have to worry about the real ones.
Huh.
Then when we were in the Desert Southwest, our mutual film teams were down there, we were interviewing the native men, and I asked Cliff Mahudi, I said, what is the name that you guys refer to the giants as? Because I knew it wasn't long walkers, okay? He said cloud eaters. And bingo, you know, we all went, whoa, that's what it is. Cloud eater meaning obviously someone their head is above the clouds. Now, in antiquity, you have the pre-flood giants. Now, when I say pre-flood, I'm going to use two different terms, pre-flood and post-flood giants, and also I'm going to do pre-Adamic, okay? Because it's my contention, and I take this on, and I'm aware of the controversy, but I believe I can document it with such things as the Sumerian Table of Kings. The Sumerian Table of Kings is one of the oldest documents in the world. Mm-hmm. And scholars accept, if you will, the contemporary king list, but they categorically reject it, which would be the pre-Adamic king list. Sure. Some of these guys, and by the way, it spans 245,000 years, close to 250,000 years. The thing that everyone loses track of in the arguments against giants, the arguments against the Table of Kings, is the supernatural element.
Right.
Every time you see any Assyrian, Babylonian, Sumerian stelae, rock carvings, bas-reliefs, you name it, okay, you always have this heavenly figure, you know, sometimes portrayed with wings, in juxtaposition against the size of like a normal person. Good illustration of that is simply go to Nemrut Dağ in Turkey. And by the way, that's where all of the 7 churches in the book of Revelation are, in Turkey, Greater Turkey.
Right.
And Nemrut is very interesting because you're going to run across, you know this too, you run across the 10 kings that supposedly ruled the world. You run across the 10 kings that supposedly ruled Atlantis. And for reasons that we're going to kind of, I guess, withhold a little bit, there's a lot of indication that Sardinia is not only what Tim said, but it's even beyond that. Because if you look at some of the structures, I mean, literally in the center of the island, it appears that Sardinia can fit the classic, if you will, description of Atlantis, okay? Now, we're not saying that, but what I'm saying is that they could have patterned their island, terraced their island, and we're talking about giants, okay? One of the interesting words for Cyclops is they call them belly hands, okay? And the Cyclops, obvious out of mythology, those were really big guys, okay? And it's so hard for people to understand, again, the supernatural nature of these entities. So I'm going to be dealing in my part of the book, Cloud Eaters, with the catastrophic indication in the universe of war in the planets, okay? For instance, Bode's law, and you look at all the planets, they have a mathematical relationship to each other, but there should be a planet between Mars and Jupiter.
Right, the asteroid belt fills that spot.
And, you know, I'll tell you what, the book of Job will come alive to people like no other book in their entire life. So I'm taking all that stuff, and even, the orbital velocity of Mars, and I'm building on the fabulous work of the late, in my opinion, great Donald Patton. He number one, was an absolute genius, and you can get that book online. It's a PDF. It's called The Biblical Flood and Ice Epoch. And what's important is that when you understand the ancients were terrified of cataclysmic events, and for instance, the Egyptian priest, okay, that it was talking to Solon, some people pronounce it that way. Anyway, the one who brought the conversation with the priest. But the point is that you're talking about the priest, and to give it the bottom line, here's what he said, and I'm shortening quite a bit, but he said, "You Greeks don't know anything about your history. You basically are ignorant of the past. You know, I'll take you back 9,000 years, okay, and there have always been cataclysms, and there will always be cataclysms, okay? And the advanced mathematics, for instance, involved in the pyramidal the pyramid building, and even if you're talking about just the standard pyramids, they're all over the world. And again, they're geospatial positioning.
Mm-hmm.
That's hard to say right now. But anyway, the geospatial positioning of the pyramids, you come right back to the fact that there is such an advanced knowledge and advanced civilization. I categorically reject the panspermia idea, okay? And I know you do, and obviously Tim and I, we're all over that subject, saying, no, the aliens didn't see this. But what is Hollywood doing? They're building towards that. But if you can understand the physics, there are even in 1758, I think, 1760 BC, give me a couple of years, we're talking about 3,000 years ago, plus or minus. The deal is that there are actual accounts of people defining Mars's orbit as so close to the United States, so close to the world that they could see Olympus Mons, the largest volcano in our solar,
with the naked eye.
With the naked eye.
Wow.
Now, people can say, oh, that's just, somebody hallucinating on some, raw papyrus or something. But the point is that it's all around the world they could see that. So when you get into planets in close proximity, then you get into Roche's limit. And Roche's limit basically says that the denser the planet and the closer it is to the lesser planet, it causes it to explode. So there's a lot of interesting facts associated with the wars in heaven and explode, because in the Old Testament, stoning, was a big deal. Mm-hmm. And obviously Joshua's longest day and all of the...
Right, Chuck Missler has speculated that was caused by a close pass of the planet Mars.
Absolutely. And Chuck was right, And then when you deal with Mars, let me tell you something, this is probably an amazing thing. When you're dealing with Cairo, and Cairo is obviously the capital of Egypt, it literally means the encampment of Mars, or the city of Mars. And some people say the camp of Mars. So who was it, Tim, that said, we're all Martians? I don't know who said that, but somebody, was it Carl Sagan? I'm looking at Josh. Sharon, do you remember?
She said it.
Yeah.
It sounds like something you hear today. We're all Martians now.
Yeah. No,
all Martians
it was
are welcome.
Either Carl Sagan or somebody like that. Maybe even, I'm not saying Richard Hoagland. Somebody said that, Mm-hmm. But now, again, I just want to say this, the idea that we're finding live Martian microbes in Antarctica, it doesn't take too much deductive thinking to think there's something there. So what I'm covering in my portion of the book, but I'm dealing with astral catastrophism. Immanuel Velikovsky came into great war with the scientific minds of his day. But quite candidly, he was more right. He even used the Bible to illustrate his positions, though he was not a Christian or a believer. So when we're talking about the origin of the solar system, when we're talking about all the different, if you will, astronomical statements in the book of Job, when we're talking about, again, Leviathan and Behemoth, when we're talking about these issues, this is important stuff because the Greeks built on it, as you know.
Right.
The Romans, everybody basically took whatever Titan or Olympian and basically just put their own name on it, And it was that way from the beginning. So when you get in, I'm going to go back to the Sumerian Table of Kings, when you understand that normal people are not what we're talking about. We're talking about physically a level of being so much beyond us. Now, I'm of the belief that there was an angelic civilization on the earth prior to the creation of Adam and Eve. And that's really controversial. People will argue the definition of the word replenish. They'll do all this stuff. But what's interesting is the Native American myths, follow the same kind of story, and the people going into the earth, whether they're the ant people of the Hopi, to escape the great deluge. Well, when you read Jeremiah chapter 4, before there was any man or cities, they're talking about another flood, so I call that Lucifer's flood, And then you go to the book of Revelation, and how does God deal with, those who are pursuing the woman with a great flood? The central theme is amazing. And, the fountains of the deep breaking, well, again, you go to Roche's limit, and now we've got planet X, the 10th planet, the 9th planet. Some people go the 11th planet, And the idea is simply this, that the ancients knew it, they cataloged it, and they built their observatory, and they were afraid of the ramifications